Hello YouTube, Wisegrape here. These are the steps I used to complete the hardware mod of Pac-Man into a 4-way vertical cabinet. Hopefully you'll find some tips which will help you in your project. Be sure to watch ETA Prime's video on installing a Raspberry Pi into your Arcade1Up. Start by verifying your monitor number and ensure the LCD controller board is compatible. Simply search Amazon for the model number and you'll get compatible LCD controller boards. For example, mine's M170ETN01.1. I'll have links in the description. You will need to source your own ground screw and nut to attach ground to the LCD controller board. I have found this kit works well because it has a flat top 440 screw and nut which fit perfectly and doesn't interfere when securing the board to the monitor bracket. Here you can see how to connect the monitor to the LCD controller board. I went ahead and connected everything up and tested it before I actually mounted anything to the cabinet. Wanted to make sure the monitor was working and that everything was running well. I wanted to rotate the monitor to give a better viewing angle when standing to the left of the cabinet. You can test this by comparing the colors when viewing from the left and right of the machine. I have my cabinet in a corner and will be standing in front and to the left all the time. In order to do this, I first removed the plexiglass from the front of the monitor, then removed the 8 screws holding the monitor in place. Be careful when taking the monitor out, as it's only supported by the little metal tabs on the top and bottom and can fall through towards the back of the cabinet. In these pictures, I've already cut the corner and rotated the monitor. I use wire cutters to cut the corner off the metal tab on the lower left so that it can fit into the bracket. It took a little effort and repeated cutting in the same spot to remove the corner piece from the metal tab. Go slow and be careful not to twist or bend the bracket. This is what it will look like when you're done, on the upper right and then again on the lower left. Next, I position the joystick. Take your time to center the joystick and verify its placement. I use tape to secure it in place while I marked the edges and the placement of the screws, then used a punch to set a small divot for help when drilling the pilot holes. I'm using a 7/64 inch drill bit and used electrical tape to mark the depth I wish to drill. Using the edge of the control panel as my guide, I found 7 millimeters will keep me from accidentally drilling through the control panel. Okay, that was simple enough and the artwork still looks great. To secure the Happ controller, I used number 8 3/4 inch wood screws with the number 8 washer to keep from puncturing through the control panel. If the joystick doesn't have a removable ball top, don't forget to place the protective cover before installing the controller. The Happ is installed by assembling it as shown. It is important to have the cone-shaped pieces in the correct positions. Push the joystick up through the control panel as shown here, and then complete the assembly by aligning the cone and E-pin as shown. Next, we will wire the joystick. The micro switches are set up with a normally closed and normally open pins. You will want to connect your wires to the number 1 and the number 4 pin as shown here. These are your COM and normally open terminals. Once you start wiring, you want to keep all your wires consistent and the same throughout the entire process, including your buttons. Wire all the switches the same. Now comes the fun stuff, drilling the extra buttons. I use the riser to give me a stable drilling surface, using clamps and scraps of wood to wedge the control panel filler plate into the box. I put blue painter's tape on the front of the panel to keep the finish from peeling and cracking. Clamping a thin piece of hobby board will also help protect the finish on the back. To keep the buttons uniform and centered, I set the center of each button 9 centimeters from the top. One thing to notice, the Happ buttons are longer than the sandwall style. If you do not place the buttons low enough, they may hit other buttons or the joysticks when you try to reattach the control panel. Once I made the center line at 9 centimeters from the top for all buttons, I used the plastic deck protector to set the two middle buttons by matching the placement of the on-off and volume switches. I then measured the distance between the two center buttons and the outer two buttons. I recommend pre-drilling a starter hole at the center of each button location to help align the step bit, since the step bit has a rounded tip. Without a pilot hole started, the step bit will tend to walk out of position and may cause your buttons to become misaligned. I use a step bit I purchased from Harbor Freight. It steps to a larger size than needed, so I marked the 1 1/8 quarter inch step with a Sharpie to help me identify where I needed to stop the drill. Because of the sharp angle of the step bit, I will have to flip the board over and drill from the other side to complete the holes for the buttons. This is only enhanced more the thicker the wood is, so a control deck may be even more challenging. And here are the completed buttonholes. Taking the time to use painter tape, a backing board, and pre-drilling your holes for the step bit really pay off in the end. I used a hacksaw to cut out a notch in the back panel for access to the power switch. I pulled the saw through and kept cutting only in one direction so the other side would have a smooth, clean finish. Next, I installed all the buttons and connected all the switches to the USB encoders. I followed the instructions that came with the encoders. I took this time to also extend the power switch cable because I'm going to use that on the Raspberry Pi so I can automatically turn off and on the Raspberry Pi. I'm trying out this Dell speaker Detroit Love recommends. I couldn't beat the price. I found it for $8 locally. I used a half round file to file a small notch on the underside of the top panel just to create some clearance for the cabling. I did have to remove two of the side screws so I could pull that panel out, route the cables through, and then put the panel back in place. I placed the speaker to fire the sound upwards towards the wall. I didn't like it aimed towards the front of the cabinet. The sound was a little too high pitched and I found it annoying right in my ear. I also didn't like seeing the power LED. It's much better aimed up at the wall and I can still control the volume easily. I used Logitech Z313 in my Street Fighter II build, and I may switch this Dell speaker out for the Logitech simply for the satisfying thump from the subwoofer you get after a fallen Q*bert. The LCD controller boards are attached using double-sided tape. Everything else is attached using industrial strength Velcro you can get from a home improvement store. The cable management Velcro comes in a roll from Harbor Freight. I hope this helps you with your project. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments. Thanks.